So where might this go further? Where may it go next to extend and build on students' thinking? So implications, please, Naomi, for teaching and learning. So practical possibilities.
Maybe one can be integrated into any of the other subject areas that the children are exposed to.
Getting kids to understand that that's how a scientific process works, that it doesn't have to have the perfect outcome, that the mistakes and the stuff-ups, I think is the word, and are part of the process, and that's okay, and it's
So
healthy.
that should not generalise into all their areas.
Yes.
You know, we could take that from the science lab as such and make it generalised into everything. That, mistakes are part of learning. So,
And some mistakes lead to new discoveries.
absolutely.
And that can come across the board too, because by showing them that you already know that you can make mistakes and it's good to be a risk taker and try new things, it's the same with science. So it's taking it from the other side.
I suppose it's also bringing that self-awareness to what is involved in when you turn on the television and you see it happen so quickly and you get these amazing results really, really quickly, but what's actually involved in trying to find a solution to something with the implications of solving a crime and not framing someone or not putting someone in jail because of a mistake that was made. All of those, the greater implications of what one experiment can have, or how vital a piece of evidence is in an investigation.
And so it really raises the issues of validity and reliability.
And it goes into moral, like ethics and all of that. So it heads into law and heading into other subjects that you could be studying, novels in English.
Because I think it is documented sometimes, it's in the newspaper of the stuff-ups that are made with, whether it's DNA testing or this or that, that there are an awareness that these aren't necessarily foolproof.
Or changes in scientific experiments, development, so that like DNA testing, which weren't available 20 years ago, all of a sudden you've had someone sitting in jail and it was something that just wasn't available to prove.
Yeah. There's a university in the States where the course content, students are given the case of individuals who are on death row, and their course content is actually researching those cases and seeing whether they can come up with really new evidence, which ultimately in some cases has led to the overturning of the result because of new developments, exactly, DNA and so on. It would be a really interesting thing for kids to explore that.
And that really brings in capital punishment, doesn't it?
Yes.
I think it's interesting to look at forensic science over time. Like now we do have all this modern technology, but going back in time when they didn't have this, how did they solve crimes? What other methods can there be?
But I suppose one wonders how far Russell can take that in his science lab. I mean, how...
But in a way, it almost lends itself to, because in a science lab you don't have the same access to a whole lot of technology, so you could rely on things that aren't as technology driven to think, well, a long time ago that's what people had to do. So what were some of the things they did? And maybe bring in some literature, I don't know, looking at Sherlock Holmes and some of the fictional crime stories and what they did.
Perhaps Russell could work closely with the English teacher on that. Or
Certainly, because some of the novels that are being studied may well have direct...
Is that Arthur Miller book in Year 7? That's a court case, isn't it? I can't remember what it's called.
In Year 10 we do All My Sons.
Oh, that's
and, well, there's some
Kill a
issues there
Mockingbird.
that arise that would be different today because of technology. We do another novel in Year 10.
She's a trained ninja.
Or an untrained.
Didn't even know she was here. just left.
There's a Year 10 novel we do with a mafia base that's got a ransom
I think
situation.
That would be a connection to outside. But
I'm thinking of the disappearing children in the school. Where they've gone to.
Follow the trail.
Yeah, Josie could use this on a Friday afternoon when they do a runner.
All the missing school jumpers.
Well, maybe it's now time to let Russell speak again.
Yeah.
And you can, what you've gained from listening to our discussion, remaining silencing, presenting teacher response.
Just to go through some of the points that were picked up throughout the 4 different areas that we went through. The students do, I'll start with Corin, the students do come up now and again to the labs where they do a few experiments in the labs. They get to use various equipments within the labs, but we don't really spend a lot of time telling them the exact names of the equipment that they use. We might mention, you'll need a beaker, but we don't go in as to why it's called a beaker and its uses and things like that. So all the equipment will be there. So even though they're using the equipment, that they're not really have an understanding as to what it is that they're using. A lot of the words that they saw within the text that I gave them, they'd never seen before. They actually don't discuss chemistry and that kind of things till term 3. So solvents and soluble, that they never would have seen. And then I was actually also quite interested to see that they'd used that terminology in their write-up. So they'd obviously believe that they know the meaning and understand the meaning enough to use it when they're doing their write-up. What made this interesting with their cautiousness, so we say, was the fact that they had no idea what chromatography was. We just touched on it saying that it is something that separates ink, and then they were given that sheet that you got right at the very start. So they had no idea how it was going to be done. You know, it could have involved huge, massive machines that people had to put things in. They just had no idea. And then after reading that and learning about the pens, they were then, had to come up with an idea on how they were going to do their experiment, which is why I guess they were a little bit cautious, because they just didn't have an idea what they were going to deal with. And I've actually got some of their ideas that they came up with in order to do the chromatography. So you can have a look at that if you want to. With regards to integrated in other areas, I do know that the English department, Josie in particular, does do novels, mystery novels and things like that, like Sherlock Holmes. Like I think they do The Hound of the Baskervilles, and they actually do a unit as well where they write murder mysteries and things like that. So it does work and tie nicely with the English area. With regards to the worry of safety and things like that, they learn that in Year 6 just before they come up to Year 7. They do a safety in the laboratory. So before they're allowed to come in Year 7, and they have to do a safety in the laboratory. So they will have done that right at the very end of term 4 before they come in. So that might be why it's still fresh in their minds, and that's maybe why they're throwing a bit of caution to the wind. Media developments in terms of how technology has changed and things like that, we do look at whether things are still useful and their usefulness in forensic science. And it was interesting that somebody mentioned the point that, I think it was you, Corin, where you said, would their stance have changed after they spoke to someone in the Think, Pair, Share? Because during the compass points, they had to say their own individual stance, what they thought about chromatography. And then they did the Think, Pair, Share, and then to finish off they did a tug of war on how reliable they thought chromatography was to a forensic tool. And if I remember correctly, only one person stood in the reliable stage. The other 3/4 stayed in the unreliable, and there was a couple that were still undecided because they believed that there was a use if you happened to correctly find the pen and find the note. So it was interesting that there's a possibility that during the Think, Pair, Share they could have changed their idea. Yeah. The other point that was made, and which was the one student that kept going on about the result, the end result, the end result, the end result, and a lot of them were thinking, if I stuff up and if I make mistakes, and the journey of learning as much when you get something wrong as opposed to getting it right is just as important as just working out the right thing. And there's a fantastic line from a movie, because as you know I love movies, which is National Treasure with Nicolas Cage, and he says to the guy that Thomas Edison tried 3,560 odd times to create the light bulb to get it to work, and when somebody said to him, you know, aren't you annoyed that it took you that many goes to get it right? He said, no, I just now know 3,500 ways not to make a light bulb work. So it's interesting that they don't see the benefit of doing the chromatography and not getting the correct result, or making a mistake, and that they can learn so much from that. So that was also quite interesting, that they just want to get it right the first time.
That's something that's probably been instilled over the years. That's something that we all, I suppose, have to work hard on
Yeah.
to undo.
Yep, definitely. But I was glad to see that they wrote bits and pieces in there that, you know, that there were things that excited them about learning about chromatography, and they didn't just feel as if it was something that they were forced to do, which I was glad to see. So yeah.
They certainly seem to make it relevant to the world and to things that they are familiar with.
We have looked at other areas, because chromatography is an area that people were a bit worried that it was going to become stagnant and wasn't going to be able to use nowadays, because it's so easy, and that's what the kids picked up on, you know, like what happens if they write with a pencil.
Yes.
You know, kids were talking about what happens if it's written on computer paper. And I think it was me or one of the other students said, you know, well, they even cut out newspaper letters now to use as ransom notes. You know, where does chromatography come in? And we look at how technology has changed, and they now use chromatography to look at drugs such as like ecstasy and see what's inside it, so they can get patterns of the different types of drugs that are found, and they use it for analysis of the types of drugs. Yeah.
Well, that's making it relevant. That's very interesting. So we're talking this morning about ecstasy versus fantasy. The tablet.
Okay.
So
That's that.
So I think it's time now to reflect on the protocol. And how did this process go, and reflect our observations.
You did a great job, considering the fact we haven't done a protocol for such a long time. We followed it.
I think we're all so rusty that we were much better behaved than usual.
exactly.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't speak, that's why.
Well, it's good to have you in that.
So improvements and changes since the last time we used the protocol. We've forgotten.
It's been a while. So suggestions for
But you
next
can just
time.
slip back into it, don't you?
We do actually.
Yeah.
I must say it felt so much easier doing the protocol now and compared to when we first started. But that's already
But I always think it's my
20 months ago or something.
it's a long time. Wow. I think it's my slowness. I just feel that this is just worked very well. It worked very well to actually take it step by step. Made sense.
We stayed on task most of the time as well.
Because the noisy, disruptive people weren't here.
Maybe turning a camera
David
also
did.
doesn't help.
I think we were much better at the describing. Remember at the beginning when we used to describe, we wanted to ask questions or make comments, but we
Interpret all the time.
we were very focused on just saying what we can actually see.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably the familiarity with that, with the routine that's made us better at it.
More confidence because we have done it many times before. Like a bit like riding a bike.
But I think it also shows that maybe we should be doing this more. But maybe not every time, but it's good to reconnect and do it. Yeah, revisit is the word. Yeah.
Because it guides us through the process. And I think I find that in my classes too, that when you start with perhaps a see, think, wonder and really focus on what you see, you do pick up things that you wouldn't just if you were to launch immediately into interpretation and discussion.
Because I think it's breaking it down into smaller bits, so you're not just hurrying through. You're taking it slowly and sitting back and actually thinking about your thinking. So I think that, so it needs to be far more thorough.
I think also because the presenting teacher's not actually speaking at all besides the presentation in the beginning, it allows you to be able to see it from other people's points of view.
But it's that slowing down, I think, that...
I also think that because we go through the process of describing and speculating, it helps us then to be more focused on, well, where should we go from here? Really looking at what the children know and then how to take their understandings further rather than planning the unit ahead from beginning to end.
And also with the sharing amongst us, I suppose, different people's ideas of where we could take the children. You know, very often it's you relying on yourself. And it's very useful, I think, to have a team around you that you could throw it open.
Very
What are your
perspectives.
suggestions? And, you know, we all come from our own perspective, as you say. So I think that's enriching. I'd like to bring my whole work program in.
Can I go after you?
But that's always what we've enjoyed the most of,
Yeah.
or what we've got the most out of these sessions, when we bring in, that's right, when we bring in our unit and help each other with where we can go further.
Thank you so much.
No?
Thank you, that was great. Thank you, Naomi.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Sharon.